Welcome to Beyond Transcripts, the podcast for educators who want to meet and exceed best practices in transcripts and education management. On this episode of Beyond Transcripts, we're talking all about how to graduate college in 4 years or less. It's unfortunately becoming more common that students are taking more than 4 years, sometimes 5 and 6 years to graduate from college. And this is problematic because it's costing more money, it's delaying entry into the real world or the next step for life. But the good news is there are ways that you can still graduate in a traditional time frame of 4 years or possibly even less. So we go through some really great tips to help you and your student prepare, plan, and execute that plan so that college in 4 years really is a reality. So stick around and check it out with me and Matt Bass, founder of Transcript Maker. Okay, we've got a good topic today. This is one that I think parents and students think a lot about, which is graduating college in 4 years, and we're going to say or less. So we hear about 4-year college degrees. Matt, how accurate is that actually for college students today?
Not very accurate.
Okay.
It's a rare student actually who gets done in 4 years anymore. A lot of times it takes 5 or 6, or even longer.
Wow, that's a long time to be in school.
Yeah, and for every additional year that you stay, the more you're paying more, so it's costing you more. That's time that you're not in a job earning money.
Right.
So anything students can do to finish on time or early is going to benefit them financially for sure.
Right. And what are some of the reasons do you think that it's taking so long for students to finish their degree?
Well, I mean, college is difficult, so the course loads are high, and if you're not focused, if you're not approaching it with a plan, then it can be easy to just kind of drift and get behind in certain areas. If you're mainly focusing on the party lifestyle, right, in college, then if the academics are not your priority, then naturally it's going to take longer. So that's one big reason. Another is just trying to take on too much. I mean, I have friends who did 2 or 3 majors in college, and if you're a high achiever and you really want to take on that challenge, then go for it. But think carefully about the workload involved because it is a lot of work. Yeah, that's a really good point. I actually had a double major and a minor in college, but I finished in 4 total years, but I had to take classes in the summer. So I was going to school year round, but still able to finish on time. And we'll get into this in our tips, but whether you have one major or you're trying to tackle more than that, you just have to be so aware of the classes you need, when they're offered, registering on time. Otherwise, you miss the boat and then you end up sort of stuck in school without meaning to. Mm-hmm. Planning is very important. Yeah. And so, some people may be listening and going, well, maybe it's not that big of a deal if it takes longer than 4 years, right? But like you said, it's longer than until you can get into the workforce, which I know some of our college students aren't necessarily eager to do that, right? But it does delay the start of when they enter the world. That's potentially spending more money. What are other issues maybe for staying longer in school? Well, it's it's just time out of your life that you could be using to achieve in other areas. Mm-hmm. I mean, once you have that college degree, you can kind of move on from there and start using it. If you're still in college, then that might delay if you want to get married, if you want to have kids, if you still have that high college workload. Right. Absolutely. So that's something to think about too. Yeah. And, if maybe you think, well, I'm going to get an advanced degree. Well, then that's longer until you can start that advanced degree. Or if you want to take a gap year in between, you're pushing back all of the things that could potentially happen. So yeah, and something else too is people will notice. A potential employer might wonder why it took you so long to get through college. And if you have a reasonable explanation, then it shouldn't be an issue. But yeah, that's a good point. On your resume, you'll say when you graduated from high school and when you graduated from college. And if there's more than maybe a 5-year span in there, they'll question that. You might be prepared with a good answer, but you might not be. Yeah. So it definitely can take longer than 4 years. Is it still possible though? Do you think are students still able to get done in 4 years if they plan well and they follow some of our tips? Is it realistic? I think it's very realistic to get done in 4 years, or even less if you're willing to work hard and do things a little differently.
Mm.
But yeah, 4 years it should be doable for any average college student.
Yeah, good. And I think it's good to know going into it, that there's a very real possibility it could take longer. But if you are aware of it, you stay on top of things and follow some of the tips that we'll get to in just a little bit, it definitely can be done. So, don't think it's impossible just because you see a lot of people doing that and taking longer. It's just they might not be as on top of things as you can be. So, let me ask, who do you feel like is responsible for the timing of graduation? I could see that there's this diffusion of responsibility, but who do you think is really responsible for trying to get done in 4 years or less?
Well, I mean, when it comes down to it, ultimately it's the student's responsibility because you are the one doing the work, you're the one doing the planning, and you have the ultimate responsibility. You can't rely on anyone else, a parent, a professor, a guidance counselor to do that for you.
Right.
Now they can help, and a lot of times they will help. Having access to a good counselor during college is invaluable. Someone who can, let you know if you're on track or not, and maybe provide some suggestions about course corrections and that kind of thing. But ultimately, it's the student's responsibility to get done on time.
Right. And so for our parents listening, it's probably time where we want to take the reins, right? And check in and remind them and ask, are you going to graduate on time? And I think those, the reminders and encouragement is helpful, but ultimately it does fall onto your student. So, trying to remember that when they're maybe spending more money trying to get out of college. But yeah, and I think even, it can feel like as a student, well, I'm trying, but the classes are impacted, or I can't take the requirements that I need. And then it feels like you don't have control in the situation, which is why some of these tips that we're going to go into next become very important. So let's get into some of these ideas for how to really graduate in 4 years or less, like you said. So the first one we've already touched on, but is creating a plan.
Sure. Yeah. And this is where it's really important to think ahead. And as a student coming out of high school, trying to think ahead, 4 years into the future can seem daunting. It's like,
right.
Well, I don't even know what I'm going to be doing 4 years from now. I don't even know what I want to major in.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of questions like that, but it's important to have a plan. The plan can change as you work through it, but if you have a plan for all 4 years, then you have something to remind you that you need to stay on course.
Right.
Something you can be working through, and this is a great thing to work on with a parent or a counselor or an advisor, to sit down with them and work through creating a plan, decide how many credits you need per semester to graduate, which courses you need to take to earn whatever degree you're going for, and really get it all down on paper or in Google Docs or something, just have it somewhere where you can reference it. Just increases the likelihood that you will stick to the plan.
Absolutely. And I think, for students going to college, I remember like, oh, you're on your own. You get to make all these decisions. You get to decide stuff. And that's great. But don't forget, you do have the support. And especially if you're not quite sure what you want to major in, I see it as even more important that you're checking with a guidance counselor. Because once you've got a major, they tend to lay it out pretty clearly for you of what you need to do and often when to be done with your degree. But if you're just sort of going in to general ed, or you think you have an idea, you don't want to end up taking all these classes that don't actually count for anything. So communicating with your advisor, I think, is really important.
Yeah, it is.
And
especially if you're going to be transferring schools.
Yeah.
Like my own situation, I was at a community college for a year, and then I transferred to a 4-year school. So you want to be talking with someone to make sure that, the courses that you're taking are going to transfer and that they're going to apply towards whatever degree you're working towards.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, plans can change, right? Which does happen. But I think also if, a wrench gets thrown in your plan, I had a friend who had to take sort of a medical leave of absence from school. And so ended up with incompletes, but didn't realize that he had to then finish those incompletes before registering for new classes. He thought he could just finish those and ended up essentially failing the next semester because he had incompletes. So it was, and then he got discouraged and, had a hard time getting motivated to continue with all of these classes that he had to make up. So plans can change, but definitely, reassess and reevaluate so that you can follow through.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've touched on majors. So it's, I'll say normal, common that students change majors. So what are your thoughts on that and how it affects graduating in 4 years or less?
Well, like in my situation, I was into computers as a kid. So when I picked computers as a major, I knew it was something where I wouldn't, there would be challenging coursework for sure, but in general, I wouldn't be struggling because it was something I enjoyed and something I already knew something about. So if you're picking a major that you already have some experience with or that you enjoy, you're probably going to have a little bit easier time than if you're picking something that you've never learned anything about before, and it's something that challenges you, like math. I could do math, but I didn't enjoy it very much. So if I had majored in math, it probably would have slowed me down a little.
Yeah. And because changing majors is common, what do you suggest if people do feel like, well, maybe that's not the right major for me, but I'd still like to try and graduate on time?
Yeah, well, a lot of students end up changing degree fields. Yeah. So, if you do decide to switch, there may be some courses that don't end up applying that might slow you down a little. So it's generally better to switch early rather than later. But it happens, so don't be too hard on yourself if it does happen. If you can, your first year, focus on completing college courses that apply to a lot of different majors, right. More general type courses, because odds of those transferring, if you end up switching majors, are greatly increased.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Which relates to our next point about being wise with your selection of courses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which there's lots of fun classes that you can take, right? And you should explore different ideas in college. But really, if the goal is to finish in 4 years or less, you really do have to be smart. Again, for my own example, I had a double major and a minor. So I was very aware of the classes that I needed and which ones counted sort of for everything or for more than one major. And I took those classes so that I wasn't having to, sort of check the boxes with courses only once. So really be smart about what you are actually taking when you're there.
Yeah. Don't take courses that you don't need. And, electives can be fun, but you need to carefully take into consideration the time that it's going to cost you.
Right.
And really focus on those courses that are going to get you towards your goal, which is a degree in your major.
Right. Absolutely. So now sometimes students go to school and they find themselves, they're not in the right place. But if someone does change schools, that will often slow them down in terms of how long it will take to get their degree. So what are your thoughts on how a school change might affect the length of time to get your degree?
It can definitely negatively impact it. Yeah. I've known some folks who switched colleges 2 or 3 times, and it slows everything down. It definitely makes it more difficult because not only are not all of the courses that you take going to transfer, right. but also just your non-academic life is going to suffer too, because if you're moving to a new dorm, there's all that time moving your stuff, getting set up in a new environment, getting familiar with a new area, a new location, how a different college does things. Right. So there are definite negatives to doing that.
Yeah. And we should say this doesn't apply to someone going to junior college and then planning to transfer. There are times where sure. it might absolutely make sense. If you're going to a school that only has 2-year degrees and you want a 4-year degree, that's not part of the long-term picture. But we more mean, you might be going to school in one school in Texas and then decide, what, this isn't for me. I'm going to move to Tennessee, or, you're just jumping ship left and right. So sometimes that change can be a part of the overall plan. But yeah, generally switching schools, even if you're doing it at the semester, can be problematic.
Right.
So our next tip that I think we'll want to talk about is don't work too much when you're in college. And we've talked about how this on another episode, how this can help lessen the burden of the cost of college is working, but we would say don't work too much.
Right. So, I think it was another episode we talked about paying your way through college, and that can be a good thing, but it can also get in the way of graduating on time if your job is taking up a lot of time that you should be devoting towards study. So, if it really depends on the courses that you're taking, how you're doing in those courses. If you're getting straight A's and everything, you can probably take on a side job. And if your grades suffer a little, generally an employer is not going to be concerned if you have a less than 4.0 GPA. So,
right. Yeah. That's one of the things that, if you're going to get an advanced degree, yes, your schools are going to look at your transcripts. But one of the things I didn't necessarily realize was that, their jobs aren't asking for your GPA. They want to know if you graduated, when, where, and with what. It wasn't, I had a 4.0. So not to say I would have worked less hard in school, but that was just, kind of a realization. So it does give you time and maybe take that pressure off of you to feel like, oh, I have to be perfect at everything.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that when you earn a college degree, it's automatically a ticket into a job.
Right.
And that's not always the case. It's not like you're going to show them your degree and they're going to be like, yes, you're hired right away.
Yeah.
So it's just, it definitely helps.
Yeah. It might be your foot in the door, but it won't get you the job.
And at some point, employers are, when your job experience exceeds your degree, then your employers are going to stop caring as much about whether or not you have a degree. They're going to be looking at all of your prior job experience, especially if you do something like independent contracting, that kind of thing, which is what I've been doing for years. And, nobody asks if I even have a degree anymore.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the idea of, work and not working too much, I think a lot of times schools have some really great campus jobs that are maybe more likely to be flexible around your school schedule. If you get an off-campus job, they might not be as understanding of your hours and your availability. So that's always, good to be aware of too, that if you want to work a little or you need to work a little, to maybe look at what's available on campus for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Or even if you can find something online that you can do to earn some money, that's another option too.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you, started a little side business while you were, going through your homeschool adventure, maybe you can continue with that. And it's, you're doing it from your dorm room now instead of your bedroom at home.
Uh-huh.
So getting back to our tips for graduating in 4 years or less, our next tip is actually something that you wouldn't be doing at college, but before, which is earning college credit while you're still in high school.
Yeah, this is a great option, especially for homeschoolers, because you're studying at home anyways, and you're already becoming a little more self-sufficient as you enter high school. So, taking a course and getting credit for both high school and college at the same time is really a great deal. So you should definitely, look into dual enrollment, look into advanced placement courses, look into CLEP exams where you can actually test out of things and get college credit for knowledge that you already have. There's so many options out there for students who are still in high school but want to kind of get a jump on college. It's a great way to end up graduating early.
Yeah, absolutely. And then our last tip is to get credit for previous work experience. So talk to us a little bit about this one.
Right. So this is sort of similar to testing out of things, but depending on the college that you attend, some colleges will actually give you course credit for previous experience in certain areas. So if you had a job that gave you experience in a certain area and you want to take a course in that area, sometimes they'll just give you credit for that if you can prove that you did pick up the knowledge. So that proof can sometimes be a test or an exam that you'll take. Sometimes it can just be providing a portfolio of work. So if you're interested in going into 3D animation, for example, and you have produced artwork in your high school years, you can, submit that portfolio to a college and they may give you partial or full credit for certain courses that you'd otherwise have to take.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that also makes me think, a lot of times college students go home in the summer, right? And they want to relax a little bit, but maybe even a job that you might have or an internship that you're looking to get, there may be college credit for that. So a lot of schools have those programs set up, but it doesn't hurt to ask. If you want to do some sort of specialized area of study in the summer or an apprenticeship, why not go to your school and, see if you can get some credit for that?
Yeah.
So these have been great tips. I think, like you said in the beginning, it seems less and less common these days of a 4-year degree that students are taking longer. But when you really follow some of these ideas, you've got a plan, you know that there might be changes, but you follow through with it. You're, not partying too much. You're taking your school seriously. It's still realistic that you can graduate in 4 years and actually less in some situations.
Yes, absolutely. And one final thing to check on with whatever college that you're attending is find out what their 4-year graduation rate is, because sometimes that can tell you, how much support and help you're going to get from that school. So that's something you can usually find online if you search for the College Board. A lot of times they'll publish the average graduation rate for various schools across the 50 states.
That's a really great point. So some of these tips and ideas are actually going to be put into action before you become a college student. So that's great for our parents of high schoolers and high schoolers listening, that there are things that you can do now to help you ideally graduate in 4 years or less. Well, thank you so much for these tips, Matt. It's been really helpful.
You're welcome.
Well, there you have it. Some really great strategies for how to help your student graduate from college in 4 years or less. It might not be the easiest thing possible, but it is definitely doable, especially if you start thinking now and go into college with a plan and really follow up and follow through. It's definitely doable. So we hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want more information sent directly to you, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. And if you would like to try out Transcript Maker free for 2 weeks, you can sign up now.